There's those types of expenses. This is generally the most expensive one on most people's P&L is their labor cost. In addition to, depending on the industry, it could also be material or whatever their business happens to be. But it's definitely one of the number one things. The other thing that I see people doing is honestly is intertwining their own.
You're checking out the Investor Shed podcast with Nick Beveridge and Jeremy Kitchen. They're on the path to financial freedom and they're taking their community with them. Stay tuned for the best free real estate investing advice on the internet.
Yo, what up, bitches? It's Nick and Jeremy here.
Yo.
With another wild episode for you. We're talking about fractional CFOs today.
In wild. Okay, let me tell you how wild it is. On a scale of 0 to Charlie Sheen, it's like Willem Dafoe. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I love William Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe. Speaking
sorry.
of Willem Dafoe, though, we got Valerie Grandinetti on the podcast today. We are talking with a fractional CFO today.
Hold on, it's not William?
It's Willem.
It's Willem.
Willem.
Oh, I've been saying that wrong forever.
Yep, you've been a very wrong boy for a very long time.
This is the Fargo guy, right?
That is the Fargo guy.
You guys are going to love this episode, I guarantee it. What kind of food should we be eating today?
Ooh, mac and cheese.
Oh, that's
You can either get a box of mac and cheese like Kraft. This is not sponsored by Kraft. Although if you are Kraft, hit us up. We're looking for sponsors. Or you can make your own mac and cheese. We're not looking for Kraft sponsors. I don't care to be sponsored by Kraft, even though I own stock in them.
You do. I bought some
remember
Tesla
that?
stock today. It's down. Did you
I
see
did
that?
too.
Did you?
I did.
Yeah. I bought like $1,300 worth.
Well, I bought $25.
Oh, okay.
So enjoy the episode, everyone. You're going to love it. I guarantee it.
Welcome back to the Investor Shed. I am Valerie Grandinetti and excited to share some good conversation with you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, Valerie. Valerie, welcome to the Investor Shed podcast. You run a unique business. You're a fractional CEO. Take it away. Tell us what got you interested in this field and what got you into it.
What got me into it? Well, I've gotten more years than I want to actually talk about because it kind of dates me, but it's upwards of 20 years of working in corporate America and helping Guy not only put together accounting departments, but helping the companies and the firms be strategic in their financial planning. And so what I made the decision is to utilize all of these years of experience that I've gathered to helping the smaller, mid-sized businesses, the people that I feel need it the most, but generally can't afford to have a full-time CFO on board. So it brings me a lot of joy just helping other people, and I felt this is the best skill set that I can bring to the table to do just that.
Very
Awesome. Cool. So what exactly is a fractional CEO? Do you mind describing in your best interpretation?
Well, it's basically telling the story from the numbers, and I just to kind of make it simple. Our numbers our numbers tell it all, and it's really important to have a grasp on it, to have it organized, to have the data actually mean something and be valuable. And so a lot of people kind of fall short on that. Most individuals go into a business because they have a very specific skill, or maybe they want to invest, but it's not an accountant. And they just kind of lack that. And so being that fractional person for them allows them to have that person in their side pocket, if you will, to give them that valuable information, that overview, strategic looking, and things of that nature that they're perhaps that's just not their skill set.
Right. Okay, cool. So in your experience, what are the most critical financial metrics that startup or small businesses maybe often overlook that you can help them address?
Oh, goodness. Most important metrics. Oh, okay. So that's a fun topic.
Are we getting too into the meat right now, or should we?
No, we can dive. No, y'all are jumping right in. Okay.
Okay.
No, it's fine. Obviously, there's going to be certain metrics that are across the board needs to be reviewed. I don't care what your business is. You're going to be looking at your top line sales and what brings in that top line sale.
Sure.
And I'm going to leave it very generic that way because for every company, that's different. If you're a property management company, how many doors do you have? If you're a construction company, it's how many jobs are you having? How many job leads are you getting? So it's always varies across the industries. But at the end of the day, we're going to be reviewing those top line sales and what things are triggering those sales, just to kind of put it in a generic term. And then, of course, looking at our margins. What does it cost to get that sale? And then, of course, your overhead cost needs to be reviewed on a very, very strict level. And then cash flow, I think, is probably the number one thing to be reviewed that most people don't.
Okay.
The biggest mistake that I see the companies making is they say, well, I made money on the profit and loss statement. But how come I don't have money in the bank?
Yeah.
Okay, there's two different things that we need to look at, and they have to be looked at and reviewed at separately.
Okay. Can you give us some examples? Like what do most people just overspend on, or where do they put their money that maybe they should reconsider? That you see a common reoccurrence with small businesses. And I'm assuming most just aren't doing enough sales. But other than that, is there anything else that you've noticed as a common pattern?
I would say a common pattern is two things: expanding too quickly.
Okay.
More than your sales can support. And so, again, it goes across different industries on what that means. But a lot of people, they want to hire in help, or they want to, instead of going at things a little bit slower, always talk about dating before you marry. So, maybe get a third-party contractor to work with you on a part-time basis before you jump in and hire employees, because hiring an employee can be incredibly expensive. You've got employment taxes, you've got insurance, there's just so much involved that goes in with hiring an employee versus just 1099 them. Make them a contractor at first. Yeah. Don't grow faster with your expenses than you can in your revenue. And so it's just having that balance and being able to look at your numbers from that way, I think is so important no matter what business you're in.
Where were you 3 years ago in my life? I'll just give you a little background. I'm in real estate sales, and I've been in real estate sales for 14 years now. And things started. They started slow, and they started getting better and better year after year. More sales, more income, and then I started to expand maybe a little too quickly. About 3 years ago, summer of 2021, I just had a lot going on, had a lot of real estate flip projects too, a lot of personal investments going on. And I decided I was going to go ahead and start this construction company and a media company and everything all at once. Hire, go from, I think we had one employee. I went from one employee to 12 or something like that in just, in probably 9 months. And surprise, I had cash flow issues. And there are all these other expenses that I wasn't quite anticipating. When you have contractors working for you, there's this thing called like workers' comp, and it's super expensive. All these things I could never imagine to account for unless I had somebody, that maybe has seen it before. But I jumped into it. I made huge mistakes. I had a net worth of like $4 million when I started all that stuff. And I almost lost it all over the last 3 years, just trying to unwind and just trying to get back to what I know. But I think it could help, like taking advice from somebody like you before you start scaling, because I bet you would have saw my situation and be like, well, hold on. Can you go in a little bit deeper on maybe, have you seen people, I'm guessing you've seen people do that.
Yes.
What are some of the common things that people underestimate other than like bringing on employees?
There's those types of expenses. This is generally the most expensive one on most people's P&L is their labor cost. In addition to, depending on the industry, it could also be, material or whatever their business happens to be. But it's definitely one of the number one things. The other thing that I see people doing is honestly is I want to touch on this, is intertwining their own personal expenses with that. Okay, so my business is making money, and I think I deserve a car, and so we're gonna push this through the business as a business expense, and they just start adding on things, and they start basically treating their business like their own personal wallet instead of like a business.
Yeah.
And so it's a common mistake. And, kind of going back to the whole growth thing, one of the things that I've always said to other people, and they don't really understand fully until they've gone through it, is it's actually an easier situation to be in if you're in a business to have to cut back.
Mm-hmm.
So say something happens and you're like, oh shoot, we need to cut our expenses back. We need to do these things. I don't know, COVID happens, so we need to reduce costs. We need to look at your current situation and say, okay, what can I cut? It's not a fun thing to do. It's certainly an emotional thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's easier.
Right.
Now, on the flip side, trying to grow your company is way more challenging.
Sure.
And the reason I say that is because it's all about timing. And timing is, quite frankly, it's a bitch, because we're all trying to put together this future looking a view, and none of us really know. But what you can do is you can look at historical trends. You can look at all of your projections and then put probabilities to that on where you think that's going to outlie, and then from there put together a forecast for that cash. Because that's what you really want to be paying attention to. And if you start to see week to week, month to month, depending on your business, that it's not going in that direction, take action. And I think that's where having that other set of eyes looking at your business and monitoring things for you, because you're a businessman, you're busy. The last thing you want to do when you've been at work all day doing what you do and building that business is come home and start crunching numbers for a few hours. And that's where I think it's helpful just to have another person coming in and saying, hey, here's your analytics, here's where I see it's going, and just keeping that barometer on it at all times, which ties into what we started, which was the KPIs. So as far as a specific mistake, yes, I see it being in labor. Yes, I see it in being overspending and just things that they probably don't need. You mentioned a construction company. I see a lot of guys. They kind of don't like to hear from me when I tell them, you don't need that new shiny toy. We can rent it instead of purchase it. Let's protect our cash. Things of that nature. Expanding too much in capital equipment prior to really having a justification for it. So in my corporate days, every purchase we're going to make that's over $5,000, I'm going to review what are its returns.
Yeah.
How quickly can I recapture these funds?
But Valerie, if I had an excavator that's only $200,000, I can save like $1,000 a week.
No,
but they forget that you have to make payments on that $200,000.
You have to make payments. Do you have a contract in place that's actually going to guarantee you the monies that are going to come in that it's going to offset those costs?
Right.
If you don't, maybe we should look into renting first. Just things of that nature, and that's what I mean by expanding too quickly. Just being really strategic and very specific about where you're going to spend your cash.
Sure.
And how that's going out the door.
Makes sense.
So vital.
Yeah, and I'm going to expand on that a little bit, Valerie. So obviously what you're talking about is growing at a steady pace, and I'm so for that from what I've seen in business. A lot of businesses and a lot of gurus out there, they're, 10X is the thing today, right? So 10Xing your business. I like the way you're talking about it because it sounds more logical, like you have your numbers behind it, and that's exactly what you do. You kind of add into that by implementing and just being a part of their business and, telling them what's realistic. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. One of the things that I always look at is a couple of things. I'm looking at your business as if you want to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
If at any given moment I have to produce from maybe a QuickBooks report, a balance sheet, and a P&L, is it healthy?
Sure.
Could we sell it? Is it valuable? Would somebody want it? And if that answer is no, what are you doing wrong?
Yeah.
and realign yourself and reposition yourself. And that's where a lot of the business owners get a little, it makes them uncomfortable because that's their baby. You just ask
Right.
them to sell their baby, and they don't want to hear those words. However, you're not in the business of creating yourself a job. You're in the business of making money.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very, very strategic about this, and you have to constantly be looking at this as what it is, which is a business.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I've heard the concept here and there, but like where it really came home to me, our mutual friend Steve Rosenberg, he was speaking at one of our events a couple months ago, and he actually brought it up. You gotta organize your business in a way where you have a sale date and that's your target.
Yes.
You don't have to sell your business, but like you should always be thinking that 3 years from now I'm going to sell this thing, so we got to do all the things that we got to do to put in place to where we can hand it off to somebody else.
Sure.
And I just thought that was
Absolutely.
fascinating. And my business partner and I looked at each other. We're just like, we got to make some changes in our business and actually like dust off that old operating manual. Make sure it still makes sense for 2024, and just put on the gas. So it was pretty inspiring, but not just inspiring. It just makes sense. We're taking all this time and effort and blood to build up this business, but if we can't pass it off to somebody one day, what's the point?
Sure.
Yes, and I'm a big fan of his. I've been to some of his events, and when he touches on that subject matter, I couldn't agree more. And what your accounting role and your CFO in that light is looking at it from those views and making sure that it's healthy, from the numbers perspective. Because the first thing you're going to hand over to somebody is, they're going to probably be getting financing of some sort, or whether that be, through partnerships or banks, whatever. They're going to be asking for the financials first.
Right.
That's the first thing they're going to look at. And if they don't make sense, they're not even going to go into further on, do you have that standard operating procedure or not?
Right.
It's not even going to pass that section to get there if your financials aren't in order. And so just kind of having that in back of mind, I think is really imperative that most business owners don't take it into consideration.
No, I'd agree.
On the flip side, I would take you on the other complete opposite direction. Most of my business owners don't start their business really 100% committed, but they're in a business. And so what I mean by that is starting it up from the very beginning as a business, structure it, put in that structure, put in what kind of revenues are you going to be expecting? How do you want this coded? A lot of my work with my clients is cleaning up the mess that somebody prior to them created. And it's usually, my brother helped me set it up, my wife, or I just hired a tax accountant to set it up. And I'll be the first one to say it. I'm just going to put it out there. Your tax accountant is not your CFO.
It's true.
Your tax accountant is going to be throwing in numbers into the system in order to get a report out that they need for their governmental filings. They have no dogs in that race on whether you have a good margin or which products are selling better than the others. If you have real estate, which ones are profitable? Which ones should you consider selling? They don't care. All they want to know is very specific items that they're going to need to do their reports. And so I think it's a huge mistake to allow that profession to set up your company for you to have the numbers that you need in order to run your business, because it's a different ballgame.
Yeah. Valerie, can you give us some secrets on what would be like some proper income allocation to just a general business, maybe in the service industry, where they can just have some sort of rule of thumb where they can start allocating a percentage of their cash? Like, how much should they allocate towards salaries, marketing, equipment, supplies, those kind of things? Are there some general rule of thumbs, or is it totally different for every single business, or are most businesses actually very similar? What would you say to that?
I would say it's very different across industries. So, you've got some industries that don't have a whole lot of labor rate. It's just predominantly cost. Like if you're in a property management field and you're basically taking in fees and charging things by fee, you're not going to have a whole lot of labor costs unless you're in on the I look at maintenance and property management fees as two separate different businesses. So it's going to be a little different per company, not per company, but per industry. Generally speaking, if you're any type of a service industry, I would say most of the time I'm looking at anywhere between 20 to 30% is your labor cost going into the revenue. It's just a general rule of thumb.
Okay.
And then your direct materials also drastically change depending on the industry. Or, we're, talking about a maintenance company, we're talking about a fencing company. Are we talking about, because obviously a maintenance company, you're high in direct labor more than you are materials.
Right.
Fencing company, you're probably half and half. So it really just depends on the industry. And so I would encourage someone just to ask questions to their specific industry.
Yeah. And sorry, what I was more had in my head was we're just talking about operational expenses and not necessarily cost of sale.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
So if you are a fencing company, you're not really figuring, okay, how much do I got to buy in fences? It's more just what does it take to keep the lights on month to month, and how much should I be allocating my income towards? Does that make sense?
Yes. So you mentioned earlier, let's just take marketing expenses. That's not only going to vary on your industry, but it's also going to vary on where you are in your business. So your startup phases, you're going to be expensing a lot more as a percentage of revenue towards marketing than you are if you're in your, during that growth period than you are when you're in your steady period. Like once you've built up a good steady base of clients, obviously marketing costs are going to go down as a percentage of revenue. So is it a certain dollar figure? I couldn't give you that.
Right.
What percentage is it? I'm going to say, where are you at in your company? Are you looking to sell it? Are you looking to grow it? Where are you at? Because I've seen marketing costs be upwards of 15, 20% of sales, which I would say in some cases is totally justifiable.
Yeah.
But if I have a company and I have a really good, solid customer base, I'm going to question that. That might be too high. So again, this is where it gets really important to be taught to be looking at your whole business and where it is in the industry, where it is in terms of your competitors, where is it in its own life cycle of the business. There's a lot of different factors that go into answering those questions, and that's where it's really nice to have somebody to talk through and be reviewing these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
One more follow-up on that, Valerie. So, we talked about sellable business and building your business into a sellable state. What metrics should people be looking for in order to achieve that status or get to that spot? And then follow up on that question, too. If you were to buy a business, what would you be looking for?
Those are very, very good questions. So obviously we're going to be looking at any contracted sales. We're going to be looking at those expenses. I'm going to be doing a very deep dive in not only expenses, but more specifically those overhead type expenses. Why? Because I want to see, is that person cost conscious, or is this something that I can negotiate and wiggle with?
Sure.
And
okay.
whenever you're purchasing a business, not only are you going to take their financials and review them, but you're going to then decipher through those numbers on, things that you could change and what you have control over versus you don't.
Right.
So for me, I've purchased businesses before. It was something that I did. And I've done a couple of different businesses I like to talk about just because they were fun, and it's so out of my element when you look at me. But that was some of the things that I was looking at. I'm looking at what are recurring revenues, what are the one-time project type revenues. I'm really doing a deep dive and trying to understand those numbers, and then looking at any type of cost, whether they're variable or not variable, and then looking at those overhead expenses and can they shift or not shift, and how fixed are they. Like if you're in a contract for a rent agreement and you're going to be purchasing this business, but they're on the hook for the next 5 years.
Sure.
Obviously, that's not going to be something that you're going to be able to shift. So those are the things that I look for when I'm looking at a business, and I would encourage people to be looking at their business in those ways as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So you owned a property, a mechanic shop, right, Meineke? A popular franchise. Yeah. Can you tell us about your experience with that?
Yes, that was interesting. It's one of my funner companies. So I purchased this Meineke, and it was distressed, I would say, not being very well managed. I knew what it took to just open up a brand new franchise. I had the conversations and went through the cost analytics on that. And then I said, okay, well, this is what I'm looking for. And I put my list together. And that's the other thing I always encourage my entrepreneurs is having, even if you're in real estate, having that specific list of what exactly it is you're looking for, so that when it does present itself, and you can jump on it. But if you're kind of unsure, then every opportunity you look at is going to look like a good one, because you don't really know what you're looking for exactly. So having said that, I found a business that was distressed. I won't go into the reasons why it was distressed, but it was. And I immediately saw that there, with just simple efficiencies, it could improve its bottom line.
Hey, quick commercial break here. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really do appreciate it. If you want to give back, let me help you buy a house, or I can help you sell a house. It's the only way I make money when I'm not investing in real estate. I don't make money on this podcast or the events I do, but I do make money only when I help people buy and sell houses. So if you're looking for your next investment and you're here in North Idaho, I want to help you personally. If you are not in North Idaho, I can still help you out. I have a vast network of referral partners all across the country in Keller Williams Realty, and I can find the right real estate investor savvy agent for you so you don't have to. It doesn't cost you a thing. Thank you for your support. Back to the show.
And a little bit of a push on the marketing, it would improve its top lines. It met all the criteria that I had set forth in terms of like cash flow, and so I purchased it. And so I dove into oil changes and mufflers. And so it's like, at one point I even ran the front desk, taking in the orders and giving away 1999 oil changes and stuff like that, just promotions and things of that nature, and just kind of dove into it, and then did exactly that. Did a huge marketing push, invested in the labor, just improved its overall look. And then I started attacking cost efficiencies. And the way I attacked cost efficiencies is going to sound a little crazy, but I'll explain it, is I bought another Meineke.
Okay.
So what I decided to do was capitalize on volume. So the more companies I had, the better price points I was getting on my cost. And so the more, and I ended up with 4 at one point, but the more that I purchased, the cheaper my cost became on all of my parts. And so I was able to make the improvements that way in terms of cost. And then I also was able to capitalize on management by having them oversee those different ones instead of just one. They were not overseeing 4, but they were still getting the same salary. So just different things, different levers, of push pulls here and there. And then, so that was a very, very fun experience.
Nice. Do you mind sharing, how are you able to buy something like that? Could anybody do something like that? Or did you have good connections, good partners for down payments? Did you get bank financing? Do you mind sharing a little bit more about how you're able to acquire 4 Meinekes?
Well, that's an interesting story. It was done through a 401k being rolled over into a self-guided 401k.
Okay, nice.
And so I was in a situation where that was an option on the table. And so that monies was able to be turned and then invested the way I wanted to see it invested. So that was how the funding started there. I had another one that I did through an SBA loan.
Okay.
So went through that whole process with the government, and that is where you really got to know your numbers and really be able to give them exactly what it is that they're looking for. And it's a very long, lengthy process, but it was beneficial for the benefit of having the lower interest rates and the better terms.
Right. And with an SBA loan, can't you buy a business for 10% down or something like that? If the numbers make sense?
If the numbers make sense, yes, and it varies. And so, yes, it's a really good opportunity for a lot of people that I don't think they take advantage of.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage everyone to look into that, especially, people of a minority group.
Sure.
You do have an advantage, and so it's a great thing to explore.
Right.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
And to go into that a little bit too, Valerie, like you said, you bought 4 Meineke's. What was your goal in mind to buy oil and carb industries, or did it just fit into that buy box of what a business was?
For me, it's just about the numbers.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because
That's
I was
it.
like, I never want to own an auto mechanic shop, but now that I think of it, like, it could work.
Like I said, it was an interesting experience. I've had some definitely funny stories that I can talk about along the way. And it was great for me, but for me, it was about the numbers. It was nothing I've never did the car industry before. I didn't know anything about it. Had to come in and learn a whole new system. Had to learn everything from scratch. But I do know numbers. And so I just had that in my back pocket and ran with it.
Is that what you found most enjoyable about it, is that you were able to learn something new and apply what you've learned through your other avenues of life into a new avenue with this?
Absolutely, which is also the reason why I do what I do. Because when I jump in to help somebody, I'm going to run the numbers and run all of the analytics as if it was mine. Okay. And so even if it's an industry that I don't know, at the end of the day, it's about numbers. And so they don't tell lies. There's no emotions there. It just is what it is. But it does afford me the opportunity to continue to grow as myself and learn a new industry and learn new things about and its own little nuances. Yeah. So I do love that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So getting back to the basics here. So sounds like, it's all about bringing in income, right? And then managing your cash flows. And since cash flow is like crucial for survival for any business, are there any innovative strategies that you can recommend for managing and improving cash flow?
I'll talk about a few. The one that resonates with me the most, I've seen it in my corporate days, and I've also seen it with some clients, and that is diversification. Mm-hmm. We all know that the market's going to do what it's going to do in every single industry. And so understanding your market, I think, is vital. And then diversifying yourself to protect yourself from it is the best strategy that you can do. And so what does that mean exactly? Well, that depends on you. You could say, I'm going to own a Meineke and then I'm going to do real estate also as a long game. But just, you don't have to stay within one industry in order to diversify. But having that diversification and just knowing each one of the markets and how you can leverage them, I think is really important. And the second thing is being open to pivot. Mm-hmm. I always say it's the power of the pivot. Understanding, hey, all of these red flags are leading up to this. What is my strategy for this? And then being able to and willing to take action. And I think a lot of business owners get so caught up and afraid of making that change. You just keep doing the same thing you've always been doing. And we all know that's crazy. Right. But knowing that, and I'm thinking right now of a real estate client that had several of these properties, and they were using one as an Airbnb, and they were using some as short-term rental, some were long-term, and they had all of these, which I thought was fantastic. But when I started doing the analytics on each single property, I started noticing the trends, and I said, we might want to reconsider this subset of properties. Now we can either switch gears and turn them into a different type of a property, or maybe sell them off altogether, just depending on how you want to, to handle this. And they ended up doing that. They ended up getting rid of the quote unquote non-performers and flipping things around, guiding that cash towards something that was a little bit more profitable, and just drastically improved their margins just by making those shifts. And so having that diversification and then the willingness to shift in your business, depending on the products. I call them products and service lines. If you're in real estate, it's your different properties. Looking at each individual one and making a strategic decision. Okay, this one's not doing X. Let's switch it here. Let's sell it. Just being willing to make those changes as necessary.
Yeah, right. I think that's really great with an outsider's perspective like yourself, because we can get caught up in the minutia of our own business. Like, we put our heart and souls into these things, we put our hearts and souls into these properties, and if they're not performing, like it's almost prideful to try to get them performing the way we want them to perform.
Well, and not overexpending. So,
Right.
I think from a real estate and terminologies, we all know we're not going to install like the big, huge spa bathroom, in a trailer park, trailer type, house. Like you don't want to do this. It doesn't make sense. So just
Right.
being sensible about what you're doing. In the real estate, a lot of the people take it as if it's their own home.
Mm-hmm.
And they all of a sudden want to redo the kitchen and they want to redo this and they want to expense all of this monies thinking, well, if this was my house, I would want it to look like this way. Well, stop. Right. This is not your house. We don't want to out expense, what the market is calling for that house. And so always having that at top of mind. And that principle, again, it goes against all of the industries, just being mindful of the job that you're on, the product that you're serving, and do what the competition and the market is requesting from you on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like making the logical choice rather than the emotional choice, because you hear that a lot in real estate too. People buy emotionally, and when that happens, it tends to be a bad deal.
Which is why I'm a big fan of numbers, because there's no emotions in that.
I love
it.
And
if you have that set guideline, this is what I'm looking for with these types of numbers. You plug it in, it either works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't, you keep going. There's no emotion here.
Yeah. So Valerie, what if somebody out there needs your help? Like, what can they anticipate as far as how involved do you get in their business? How much time does it take? Is it more of a consultation, or are you more like kind of on payroll fractionally for a little bit? Like, can you give us a little bit more of a deep dive on if somebody really needed your assistance to figure out what the hell they're doing when it comes to managing their finances in their business? Is this something that's temporary that eventually they get cured, or do they need ongoing maintenance? Those kind of things. Can you get into that?
Sure. What I find most of the time, and this isn't all cases, but most of the time, we need that initial, what I call a look-back review. Look-back review is simply going to be me diving in, and I do get intimately involved, and I want to understand all the intricacies of your business, and then we come up with a plan of action. That plan of action could be you need guidance once a month, you need guidance, maybe once a quarter. Mm-hmm. Just something, it depends on your company. It depends on, again, where you are in the life cycle of your business. More often than not, it's going to require cleanup. Just saying, most of the time our books are just not done and set up appropriately to give you the data that you need. And so if that's the case, it's usually about a 3-month project, 3 to 6 months, just depending on the company, to get things cleaned up. And then we go on what I call just a set it, forget it mode, that cadence. Things are running smoothly. And then we, move to either once a month or once a quarter is generally my guidance on that. I typically don't like to move to, every half year, because then too much has happened.
Sure.
And it's too far removed for me. But typically that's normally what we try to strive to get to in a company. So for a fractional CFO, if you needed somebody every day or every week, you probably need to hire them full time.
Okay.
So more than likely with me, it's a once a month, once a quarter type situation. Might take a little bit of work to get us there, but that's our goal.
Gotcha. So if somebody wanted to hire your services, they can't really anticipate that you're going to be helping them fire their staff and that kind of stuff.
No, but I definitely give guidance on that, of course. And the other things that I give guidance on is compensation plans, trying to put those together and structure it to where it is in alignment not only with the company and the business, but the overall business's strategy and vision. I think that's really important. We just talked, and it kind of brings us back to full circle. Your labor cost is probably going to be one of the most expensive things that you take on. So structuring their compensation plan is vital. And so having someone who understands not only where your business is today, but where you want it to be, and structuring that comp plan to work with that, and actually making sure that that's what we're going to be, getting to, is really, really, really important. And so that's the other thing that I do. In terms of like firing and such, of like, I'm not HR. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that job for you. But I definitely will help on the structuring of compensation plans.
Okay. When it comes to physical locations, do you ever do you fly out and go through the books of people's businesses, or is it purely virtual?
Most of the time, it can be done virtual, depending on the structure of the company. I have had requests to come out and just sit right next to and dig through things myself, which is fine. I can do that, but it really it can be done most of the time virtually.
Okay.
I've had a client in Germany, and so I didn't get to go to Germany though.
No, bummer.
But I did have a client in Germany, so things can be done virtually nowadays. It's very, very much the world we live in right now.
Yeah, I actually get to go to Germany next month. It'll be my first time abroad, which would be awesome. Yeah.
Nice.
So, sorry.
Ready for business or pleasure?
A mix of both. It's a team. It's my real estate team annual team trip. We usually go to Mexico. At an all-inclusive resort, but this time we're going to Spain, and my business partner is getting married, so we're having the team come check out her wedding, and then my wife and I we're gonna drive up from Spain through France up to Germany and back. So we're just gonna be road tripping most of the time through Europe, which should be pretty fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
should be pretty
amazing.
intense. Never done anything like it.
No. Okay. Well,
Valerie,
we'll have to see some pictures.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to kind of go back to the last subject a little bit. So when you're consulting about businesses and trying to get people's, books to where they think or where you think they should be, does anyone ever give you feedback or pushback like, no, I don't want to implement this stuff? And does their, I guess, negativity lead to a downfall in their business if they don't take action?
Have I had pushback? Yes.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
actually encourage it.
Sure.
So I like healthy conversations, and healthy conversations mean we put everything on the table and there's nothing that we can't talk about.
I love that.
And so when we have those, you're saying pushbacks, but maybe it's a disagreement on how I want to do things, and I want to understand why.
Sure.
Maybe how I understood things is incorrectly, so let's make sure there's no communication errors.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I want to understand what the alternatives are, and then I want to go through and say, okay, here's our options. I lay it out, and if we take this path, this is going to lead you here. If you take this path, it's going to lead you there.
Got it.
At the end of the day, this is your company.
Right.
You can choose how you want it to be, but I'm not going to hold my tongue. I will definitely be the person that tells you if you want to keep things the way they've always been, you're always going to get what you've always gotten, and then you don't need me.
Right.
And I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not afraid to walk away. That's at the end of the day, I'm here to help, and that's it.
Sure.
And so, so have I had pushback? Yes, but we've had great conversations, and then we end up coming up with a strategy that works for everyone, and it ends up being, a great outcome. And then they're happy, and they're getting still what they wanted with the improvements that they needed. It ends up being a good thing. So I don't say that as a bad thing to get pushback.
I just wasn't sure how that all worked out with somebody, because again, a lot of people who are business owners, they take pride in what they've built.
Yes.
And having someone, obviously they hire you to come in, but having someone come in and say make these changes and do these things and make some things like, am I doing something wrong? And again, it all comes back down to this pride in business, because people are very stern about what they've built, and they take a lot of just pride in that. So I was curious how that all worked out on your end. So.
And I think that's a really good point. And the way that I handle that is, one, I understand, because I'm a business owner myself. Mm-hmm. I understand it's your baby, and I'm not going to come in and tell you your baby is ugly.
Though you should sometimes, probably.
We're going to talk about the baby, and we're going to talk about what we can do to modify the baby's behaviors.
Yeah.
That's it.
You're going to tell the parent that they should be changing the damn diapers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, thank you. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So I'm very mindful of that, and I'm very, very, very conscientious of this, because I understand. And at the end of the day, I'm not doing you any favors if I'm not making improvements, and if you and I are not communicating, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And so when I come in, I'm not there to run the show. I absolutely know that this is your company and you run the show. I'm here to help.
Yeah.
I am just simply an assistant to you. and I'm going to listen to what you say. I'm going to understand what your immediate needs are and what your long-term vision is, and then put together a strategy to get that for you. Then we tweak it. So ultimately, it's not my product, it's yours.
Sure.
And it's based off of your wants, your needs, and everything that you've communicated to me. And we'll keep tweaking it until we get it there, just with my help and guidance.
Right on. So if somebody did want to get more information, how can they get in touch with you? And do you even have any availability right now? Because I think you're a one-woman show right now, right?
Yes, I do have a team that I work with,
Oh, okay.
but they don't, 1099s. I don't
Right.
hire on. And so we work with each other as needed. So yes, I can take on clients. And the best way to get in touch with me is vitalitycfoconsulting.com, which is my website. And within that website, you can book an appointment with me directly.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll have a link in the show notes for that.
We will, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank
And if
you.
we don't, just call us out and we'll put it in there.
Thank
I have
you.
one more question for you, Valerie.
Sure.
We talked about this a little bit before the show. Grandinetti, it's your last name. I think the story behind it's really great, and it fits you very well. Can you kind of go into your last name's meaning and how that's actually maybe catapulted into you to where you're at right now?
Well, I wasn't born with the name, but it was very fitting.
Okay.
The name Grandinetti is Italian name, comes from two words. The root words are gran and dinette. Gran, of course, for some who don't know, means big. And dinette, also very close to Latin, very close to Spanish. Dinero means money. So
Okay.
the name means big money.
Love it.
We got Big Money Valerie on today. I love it.
I think that's a good topic to end on. Why don't we do our final questions now?
Yeah, of course. So, Valerie, what we do is we do have some predetermined questions as we talk about at the end. First of all, I do want to say, I got a ton of value out of hearing you talk today about how you structure your businesses and how you help people. I think it's really great. And if anybody's looking for a fractional CFO, please contact you. Hopefully, we can bring some business your way as well. These
you.
questions are pretty simple. If you had one business or investing book you recommend every single real estate investor read, what would that be?
Oh, besides the IRS tax codes.
That's a boring one.
Sorry, that's going to totally bore you. Honestly, the one that just resonated and popped out of my mind is a very old book that I just still love, and I've read it a few times, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, yeah.
There's just so many valuable lessons in this book, and I feel like every time I read it, I get a different message.
Yeah.
And because I'm in a different place in my mind and in my business, and maybe I have something different going on. So I always just get a different take out of it. So that would be one that I would recommend.
Yeah, perfect. You said really old book. I thought you were going to say Richest Man in Babylon, but I started reading that one again last night.
I read that
go
one
through
too.
my typical 3 to 4 books I read over and over.
I think Rich Dad Poor Dad. What is that
Yes,
going on? Like 30 years old now?
Probably, yeah.
It's really old. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually
It's-
reading
it's a
Richest Man in
classic.
Babylon to my daughter last night while she was sleeping.
Oh, good for you.
I'm like, I don't know if you like this, but I felt good to do that. So, next question for you, Valerie. If you had $30 million gifted to one of your bank accounts, what is the first thing you would spend it on?
Oh, a charity. I
love it.
I one of the organizations that I work with that's near and dear to my heart is the Women's Shelter.
Yeah.
I teach a finance class. It's a six weeks course that is mandated to anyone who is living in the shelter, so
Okay.
that they can try to get their life back on track. So that's the first thing that I would do is give to the shelter.
I love that. That's so good. I should hook you up with our friend Sarah Barb. She's trying to do co-living right now, and she wants to implement, financial structure into co-living spaces and teach them how to better themselves and get back on their own feet. So I think that'd be a good connection for you guys.
Absolutely. I've been doing this for a few years now, and it's very rewarding, and it's a completely different kind of a conversation. So,
for sure.
But yeah.
Very good. Next question for you is, how do you define success?
That's a near and dear one. Success. What does that look like? I think success is not a monetary valued item. To me, success is the feeling that you get each day. Success is contributing to others and how it makes you feel. So to me, success is very much a feeling and not a measurable item.
I love that. That's
Good
very
answer.
Yeah. Next question is, what do you like to do with your free time?
Oh, I actually do bikini competitions. I'm in
Me
the
too.
NPC bodybuilding. So I just did my show in May and placed first, and now
congratulations.
preparing for nationals. So
Wow.
my free time is in the gym.
There you go.
All right. I'm going to get on the internet after this. No, just kidding.
Valerie, and again, so people, if you missed it in the middle of the episode, can you tell us one more time where we can find you and how to get in touch with you if we want?
Sure, it's Vitality CFO Consulting.com.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Valerie, thank you so much again for joining us today on the Investor Shed podcast. If you found this episode helpful or enjoyable, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Find the episode on YouTube as well for the video version.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
guys. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks,
thank
Valerie.
you, Valerie. Great talking to you.
All
See
right.
ya.
Thank you so much for checking out the Investor Shed podcast. If you enjoyed your time, make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow along on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at The Investor Shed for shorts and promos about each episode. Do you want to be a guest or know someone who has great real estate investing advice and stories? Reach out to us at theinvestorshed@gmail.com.